And now, for the moment you've been waiting for, we have one of the most, can I call it prolific? I don't know what I'll call it. This is what I'll say. I'm going to say that there is a doctor in the house, there is a metaphysician in the house, and there is a wisdom keeper in the house. And that is all of you. And then there is the Guy Williams, okay? This man is, I don't know, he's kind of like a Sean Connery, so he does get better looking with age, but really, like, the depth of his soul and his wisdom, and like, I just, as soon as I see him anytime, I like, it's like a magnet. I like jump like a kid, right? Because you just want to be in his presence. That's who you are. I want to be in your presence. You are an amazing, amazing, incredible, deep wisdom keeper. And I am so blessed to know you. And I'm so blessed that each one of us gets to be in his presence today, because we are all standing on holy ground, and he reminds us of that. So without further ado, Reverend Dr. Guy Williams.
Reverend Nicole, thank you very much. And Reverend Michael, thank you for inviting me. And oh, it's so good to be here. It's good to be anywhere, but it's good to be here. You know, up until about 3 weeks ago, I've been doing Sunday services by speaking into an iPhone. So we started our live services 3 weeks ago in our courtyard. But here it is. So it's so good to be with you. And I want to look at the camera and speak to you, courageous and committed individuals that are part of our virtual community, because, you know, this is where things are. So 2 things before I get started. First, I was delighted of Lindsay's song. It's been a long time, change is coming, because, you know, if I was to say I have a Bible or a sacred scripture, it's Lord of the Rings. Tolkien is one of my great spiritual teachers, and there's a scene in the Two Towers where the riders of the Rohirrim they're being led through this wilderness by this very interesting old world character, and as they're there, he stops and he touches the earth and he says, "Do you feel it? The wind has changed. Change is coming. Don't you feel it? The wind has changed. Change is afoot." We can sort of feel it. We're moving in this sense of cautious or strategic optimism after this year. And also just listening to the beautiful words of Ernest Holmes from Peggy today, and she reminds me of something that when he speaks about who we are as an idea that is being manifest, you know, through the divine itself. And I think about that. I've been thinking about that quite a bit, because yesterday, April 10th, 1955, it was Easter Sunday that year, was the passage from this world of probably one of my spiritual heroes, probably the greatest spiritual hero, and that was Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And what's very interesting is this was a man who was vilified, is excoriated, he was exiled. None of his stuff was published during the time that he was alive, on and on and on. But he passed peacefully on Easter Sunday, which I think is just such a lovely thing, because it was such an important thing. And, you know, he was asked often, why is it that when we start talking about Jesus, you start talking about atoms and molecules and, you know, all that other kind of stuff? And he said, because the Easter mystery is not an anthropological event. It's a cosmic event. It's an evolutionary event. For Teilhard, the entire cosmic experience can be summed up in one word, and that word is evolution. And what he also said, which I love this, is he says, you and I as human beings, we are evolution become intentional. Breathe that in. Just maybe quietly to yourself, just breathe that in and say to yourself, I am evolution become intentional. You know, that this great cosmic experience that we're all in, it is knowing itself through you and I. We are the eyes, we are the ears, we are the hands of a divine idea that is knowing itself in the entire cosmos. And in that, it's not just simply a human event. In fact, what he would speak of is this, is that when we think of our home here, planet Earth, what he says is that we should not think about ourselves as an individual species, but rather we should see and feel ourselves as connected to the earth to the degree that you and I are the mind and the heart that is leading this planet, this cosmos, to awaken to its spiritual magnificence. So think for a moment about that. Yes, that how would we be doing things differently if we were collectively considering that everything that we are doing is a representation that we are the heart and the mind of the planet. So all of us have gone through some wild year, have we not, in one form or another. But you know, one of the things that I think about often is this, is, you know, a year ago, March, when the pandemic hit and the entire planet shut down, what amazes me is that the entire planet, billions of us, got on board, got in line within days, moments, hours. We organized ourselves as an entire planet to do something. So just imagine, you know, we have that technology, we have that capability, and imagine if we organized ourselves in the consciousness of experiencing ourselves as the heart and the mind of the planet. Dr. Holmes says that we are a center of divine consciousness within the vast whole. We are evolution become intentional. And I want to talk a little bit about that today, if I might. And I want to kind of go in three directions if I can. The first is, at some point during this talk, I have it written down, so eventually I'll get to it, is my favorite quote from the Science of Mind text. And the other thing that I want to talk about is this idea of evolution and how evolution works, whether it's the evolution of the soul, the evolution of our own consciousness, physical evolution itself, what's happening literally on the planet today. And then, of course, I want to talk about Mars. So I don't know if you guys have been tracking this Mars thing, but it has me so excited. I don't even know what to do with myself on it. And I guess it's coming up because even as we speak, 300 million miles away, we are getting ready to launch a little helicopter drone thing that's going to be, it's like they're likening it to the Wright brothers' first flight. You know, it's this little thing that's going to fly and do some experimenting. But that's not the half of it. Here's the thing that I don't know if you guys heard this story or not. This has me reeling. So not only did we launch a rocket and fly this thing 300 million miles away, but then we had this spaceship that was landing, and as it was landing, it had a crane that lowers this Mars rover on the planet. And if you did anybody watch this thing? So did you see the parachute? So the parachute, there was this red and white parachute that was part of this thing. And here's the thing that's really cool, is this parachute had the engineers encoded a message. So computer nerds, as they're watching this parachute on Mars, landing a crane to land you know, whatever this Mars landing thing is, these computer nerds are looking at the parachute and they go, that's code. Seriously, that's code. That's binary code. And they figured out, knowing binary code, they read. And so what the engineers broadcasting from Mars to us during this remarkable time in our evolution is dare mighty things. Isn't it fabulous? Dare mighty things being broadcast from Mars. So it gets better. So when I read that, I thought to myself, I know that. I know that. That is from a speech that Theodore Roosevelt gave in 1910 in the Sorbonne, and it's called The Man in the Arena. And I'd like to read that if I might, because this is what they're doing, and of course there's that term daring greatly, which is Brene Brown, which is all of that, her kind of stuff. All of this stuff comes from this speech. So these engineers are broadcasting from Mars this to remind us of this speech that Theodore Roosevelt gave in 1910. And he writes, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself or herself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, who at the worst, if he or she fails, at least they fail while daring greatly. Far better to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who know neither, who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows not victory or defeat." It isn't this what Jesus talks about, we're not Jesus, but John talks about in the Revelation, the tepidness. They're neither hot nor cold because they're not engaged in one way or the other. That's not an evolutionary event to be safe, to be insulated, to be, sequestered from. But it's to get into life in all of its fullness, in all of its glory, and in all of its failures. Several years later, his niece, Eleanor Roosevelt, another hero of mine, said this. She says, "The purpose of life is to live it, to taste the experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly and without fear for new and richer experiences. That the purpose of our life is to live it in all that it is and all that it could be and all that everything is, with all of its glories and failures and mistakes, and learning, because this is the process of evolution. This is how we learn. Watch a kid learn to walk. What is it? It's a whole series of failures before they get it. Remember the time that you first learned to drive. It was a series of failures until you got it. Anything that we do, it's how our mind, it's how the whole thing is, it's how we're worked. So just kind of breathe that in for a second and say that again silently to yourself, that the purpose of my life is to live it to the fullness. And again, I'm reminded of this first century radical Palestinian teacher where he said, "I came that you might have life and have it abundantly." And how do we live that life? To dare mighty things, to hoist the sails on the winds of change and to see where it takes us. But so much, or I think so often what happens is that we don't move. We're living in a world where people aren't feeling or living their life abundantly, but rather they're feeling guarded, or they're living fearfully, or they're living minimally. They're living small. They're playing it safe. They're afraid of hurt. They're afraid of, some story that they made in the past and this mausoleum and some future or some past trauma that they're, spending all their personal energy sort of paying this mortgage to something that doesn't exist anymore. It's like we're way more interested in holding on to our past than we are about living life fully. One of the things that I read a lot last year because there wasn't a whole lot else to do. But one of the things I got back to one of my favorite authors, a man by the name of C.S. Lewis, and he wrote a brilliant book back in the 40s that is so salient today called The Great Divorce. And in this book, he harkens back to Milton, and what he's basically saying is this: it's better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. It's better to feel the control of our misery than it is to take the risk, to surrender, to dare mighty things, that we kind of hold this back. Because it's about how we manage our power. Because as spiritual beings, as living beings, as part of this thing called life and earth and all of that. But at the level of spirituality, what is spirituality? Good question. What is spirituality? Spirituality are the practices we do to manage our power. That's what it is. Doesn't matter what the practice is, but it's one that we use to manage our own personal power, because we are way more powerful than we even know how to believe. And again, going back to Teilhard, what is that power that moves all things? What he said is this. He said that power, that creative force that's in all things, that moves through all things, that creates all things, is the power of love. And not this sort of tepid Hallmark card sentimentality love, but a powerful love, an engaging love. What he says, Teilhard said, is that when we can really discover and appreciate the power of love, it will be as if we have discovered fire for a second time. Now, this is a remarkable thing, and I could talk all night on this, or all day, morning into night on this, because fire in our evolutionary experience was a game changer. From fire came language and story. From fire came the ability to protect ourselves, to expand, to grow. All technology, our whole culture, our whole civilization, everything that you and I are today is a result of some character who didn't run from the fire, but acted in a counterintuitive way and picked it up and brought it home and said, wonder what I can do with this? How can I use this? It changed the entire trajectory of our evolution. What Teilhard says is the power of love is that significant. I mean, we've already got this technological thing handled, right? I mean, like I said, last March, we changed on a dime. Everything shut down. We changed everything. And it speaks to that creative force and power within us. But, you also look at this and, these people that made billions of dollars off of other people suffering and the environmental degradation and all the other drama that was there. Imagine if we loved the planet enough, if we loved ourselves enough to know that we are the heart and the mind of this planet, and we organized and acted in accordance, what would that be like? So one of the little things that chafes me is when I hear people say, I can't wait till we get back to normal. Because what I know is normal wasn't that good for most of the planet. And it's counter the experience of evolution. So there's this Franciscan brother priest by the name of Richard Rohr, and I enjoy his writing, but he articulates something that is a mystical tradition that reveals itself in science and evolution, reveals itself in our own spiritual evolution, reveals itself in every aspect. It's encoded in every spiritual tradition. As a spiritual director, when I work with clients, this is a lot of my work in discernment. And what I will offer is this, is that, is what the mystics teach us is there are three great scriptures. The first and foremost is the book of nature. If you want to understand the mind of God, if you want to understand the mysteries of the cosmos, plant a garden. Watch the starry world. Be still in nature and see what she has to teach you. The second scriptures are the sacred and wisdom writings from all traditions. And you laugh when I say that Lord of the Rings is mine, but it is. Tolkien was this remarkable visionary. I mean, you read the Silmarillion, there is no more astounding and beautiful creation mythology than that one. And it doesn't matter which tradition it is, because they're all speaking from the level of soul. So they're saying the same message, which is congruent with what nature is saying, which is congruent with the third scripture, which is your heart. When nature and sacred readings and our heart are in accord, there's discernment. Then we know how to navigate. We know where to direct the sails as we hoist them in the winds of change. And this is how this process works, is that in all these things, and you will recognize this, by the way, there is order, disorder, and reorder. Order is what's predictable and known. It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be known, right? I mean, there was a story that changed my life years ago. Actually got me into the school of ministry. They were interviewing this woman who had, she had lived at this town in Massachusetts that was a toxic waste dump, and they were, and of the 11 families of members of her family, 9 were either dead or dying. And they said, well, why don't you move? And she says, well, it's hard to move. And then she started talking about your family or dead people and all this other kind of stuff. And I started thinking to myself, woman, if I was living on a toxic dump, I'd be out of there. Except I started thinking, I was in a job that I hated, that was literally killing me. And I was telling myself stories about why I couldn't leave, because it's hard to move. Oh, I had a mortgage and a car payment and you name this and you name that kind of thing. So we all have that. Order is the thing we want to hold on to. And then something happens. A phone call, a diagnosis, the loss of a job, the loss of a partner, a pandemic, whatever. Disorder comes and it disrupts the order. That's evolution, right? An ice age, whatever, you name it. Disorder comes, and we don't like disorder. And what we want to do is we want to take the bus from order to reorder without going through disorder. But disorder is where the juice is, right? Disorder is where the juice is. And we've all kind of been there because it's the trickster. And the whole story of Easter and Jesus is not a martyr. He's a trickster. Yes, my teacher used to say, better a trickster than a martyr be. But he's a trickster because he turns the whole thing on its ear and reorganizes the whole thing. It reminds me of that poem from Hafiz, the small man makes prisoners of everyone he meets, but the wise woman slips under the moon and throws the keys to the rowdy prisoners. That's Jesus. That's disorder. And then there's the reordering. And the reordering is where we are right now, right? We have a choice. We have a choice in our lives personally. We have a choice in who you are as a spiritual community. I know in my spiritual community, it's where we're sitting. We have a choice as a nation. We have a choice as a species. How do we reorder? not go back to normal, but you know, what is God? In God, all things are new. You know, Teilhard used to say that God lives a little bit in the future and lures us, draws us, invites us. Reorder invites novelty, agility, teachability, openness, the willingness to dare mighty things, even though we might and probably will fail. And so what guides us? What guides us? What guides you? What is your spiritual practice? What is your prayer? And I'd like to offer you a rendition, a translation, a transliteration, or whatever, it's how I do it, of a prayer that my teacher used to give. Because as his disciples, his students came to him one day and they said, oh, before I get to this, I got a quote, and I will. So in the Science of Mind text, my favorite line, it's on page 281 in the text for those of you keeping score. But Ernest Holmes says this, he says, when things look the worst is the best time to work, the most satisfying time. When we're in disorder, that's where the juice is. That's where the fun is. That's the place to work. Because I don't know about you, but I'm lazy. You know, if it's been working, I'm not going to do anything about it. But when things feel like they're worse, when we're in that experience of disorder, that's what it is. And he says, the person that can throw themselves with complete abandon into that limitless sea of receptivity, having cut loose from all apparent moorings of the past, to that person comes the greatest experience. And so my invitation is to pray with me this morning that we can cast ourselves into that limitless sea of receptivity, to let go of all the moorings from what used to be order, to understand in these tides of disorder, there's a presence that can still the storm, that will guide us, that will navigate us to the reorganization, to the reorder, to that which is coming. And so it begins, you know, we all know it as our Father, but really it's Father among us. But really what it is it's any name of God, right? It is Ganesh, the remover of all obstacles. Bhagavan, the beautiful and attractive one. El Shaddai, the mountain of refuge. Allah, the compassionate and merciful. The great artificer of the universe. The supreme architect. Every name contains a dimension of that which is. It is whole, it is complete, it is wholly within itself. Understanding as I know that there is an arc of this volition, of this evolutionary experience that is moving. This kingdom that is to come is an awakening of all creation to its divine magnificence. And I want to be part of that. Sign me up. Let me in. Give me this day my daily bread. That which I need that keeps me from distraction, fill me. It is good for me to ask. Knowing that, that as Jesus says, I came that you will have life and have it abundantly. Give to me the thing that is mine. And forgive me of my debts. Forgive me of my bondage. Forgive me of where I have failed as I release those who are indebted or in bondage to me. And let me never forget, but always remember. And may I be guided away from the failures and temptations and be delivered from the erroneous actions and step into the glory of this new reorder, that it is here for you and for me. And for this we are grateful. May it be so. And so it is. Thank you.